They say life is a competition. The fight to be first. The survival of the fittest. Winning. Nobody wants to be a loser. Now, winning basically means getting more of what you want in life. And as a mathematician, I can help with that. Because there is a real science to success, based on ideas from some of the last century's most beautiful minds. From how you can analyse and take advantage of your opponents,
You need to find a way to be as unpredictable as possible.
to deciding whether to cheat or play fair.
You can put a good apple in a barrel of bad apples. It's always going to turn bad.
Being more strategic will help you get ahead. But if all of this sounds a bit selfish, I'll also be showing you how cooperation can trump conflict and how everyone can be a winner. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Hannah. How are you?
We're walking away with no money because you're an idiot.
No, that's
You're
not
an idiot. You're an idiot. That's what you are. You're an idiot.
Whether it's happier relationships you're after, a bargain, or a better world, a look at the science of winning can help and reveal some surprising truths. So join me. You'll lose out if you don't. To get the best result in any situation, maths can help. Let's take just one example. Something as simple as ordering dinner. Should you choose burger or steak? Now, you absolutely cannot afford it, but that steak does look incredibly tempting. And it's almost your birthday. Surely you deserve a £25 splurge every now and then. First of all, ask yourself, what do you really want? Steak or savings? Well, you need to decide what winning means for you. And that might change when your mates arrive. Let's imagine that everybody has exactly the same choice, burger or steak. But you know that your friends are notoriously frugal. So if they all go for the burger and you split the bill evenly, you could end up getting that tasty steak for a lot less. The £25 hit from your steak, combined with the £5 for their burgers, means everyone pays £10 each, which, frankly for you, is an amazing bargain. But hold on, the waiter's coming over and he's heading towards your friend, who you know loves a ribeye. Is she thinking what you're thinking? And what about the others? And so begins a frankly very British game of silent guessing and calculating. If she goes for the steak as well as you, then you're shelling out £15 each. But if he goes for the steak too, then that's £20 ahead, which is far more than you can possibly afford. But is it really fair that your best friend, who always does the generous thing, ends up spending £20 for a measly burger? So what's the real win here? Well, it's complicated. Do you prefer saving money, a delicious dinner, or being fair to your friend? Having been fleeced, will she ever want to meet up again? The key thing is that what you want can be scored, and mathematicians like me give it a fancy name, your expected utility. We express your preferences as values that capture just how much you instinctively want something against the price, and then factor in other stuff like risk. In this case, that your dear friend might ditch you for busting her budget. Looks like steak pit friendship this time. So, there you go. If you can figure out everyone's preferences and you know what you want, then the key question becomes, at the lowest cost to yourself and without having any control over other people's actions, how do you get what you want? Well, thankfully, mathematics can help you find a winning strategy too. Whatever decisions we make, having a good strategy means the difference between knowing what you want and getting it. It was the mid-20th century maths genius, John von Neumann, who more than anyone else turned our winning instincts into a science. Von Neumann established a completely new field of study called game theory, which was concerned with the mathematics of both cooperation and of conflict, how to avoid losing, and more importantly, how to win. His efforts culminated in this here, a theory of games and economic behaviour. 641 pages, packed to the brim with formulas, which was once described as one of the most influential and least read books of the last century. Written with the economist Oscar Morgenstern and published in 1944, it proved how we can all get ahead when one party's loss is the other's gain. It's not for the mathematically faint-hearted, but at the core of the book is a strategic principle that's surprisingly intuitive and easily explained with some cold, hard cash. So, you and me are here, and we're going to have a go on those slot machines. And I've got a nice bag of 2p coins that you and I are going to share. Now, the polite way to do this is just to let you help yourself. After all, I trust you to play fair. But actually, I really shouldn't. Von Neumann assumes, rightly so, that we both want as many coins as we can get. So what should I do? Well, I should split this into 2 piles as evenly as possible and then let you decide which half you want. And given that you are watching me like a hawk, the only way that I can guarantee I don't lose out to you is by me splitting and you choosing. I don't get as many 2p's as I might like, but I win by minimising the maximum amount of fun at the fair that I can lose to you. This is known as the min-max theory. And as strategies go, you can apply it to pretty much anything. So if you've got 2 kids that are fighting over toys, just get one of them to make 2 piles and the other one to pick which pile they prefer. Or if you've got boring household chores, you write 2 lists and your partner chooses which list. Sounds pretty simple, but you have to remember that your split will take into account your preferences. So you get to decide if you think the utility of a huge pile of ironing and doing all of the hoovering is equivalent to the utility of unblocking the loo and sorting out all of the bins. Now, strangely, von Neumann didn't get into that particular conundrum in his book, but his proved that you can always minimise the losses and maximise the gains while taking into account the preferences of 2 warring parties was hugely influential. Such an analytical approach to winning gripped people's imagination. And crucially, von Neumann took inspiration from one rather unpredictable game. Von Neumann was an exceptional mathematician, and perhaps because of its strategic complexity, he was particularly interested in poker. He said that real life is about bluffing, about little tactics of deception, about asking yourself, what does the other man think I mean to do? And that is what games are about in my theory. When it comes to winning big at poker, there's one woman you need to know.
Wow, this is bold. A 4-bet to 4,100.
Sick move.
Liv Boeree is the European top-ranking female poker player.
Really strong play by Liv Boeree. She's clearly been eating her vitamins.
Vitamin B for bluff.
I'm meeting Liv to find out how poker strategy might help us get more of what we want in life.
These days, the very best players are very analytically minded folks who are comfortable working with maths to sort of really get a solid understanding of the theory behind the game. And then the psychology is, I like to think of it as the cherry on top.
Okay, let's talk about the basics then. What calculations are you making?
If I'm going to bet chips, if it's 30% of the time going to be the best hand and 70% of the time going to be the worst, well then I can multiply those numbers against the chips that are involved, and that will be my expected value from a situation. And that applies in many real life situations too. Say I'm like running late for a flight, and I have two options. I can either go over to the airport, try and make my flight, but run the risk of then missing it and losing the value of the flight and having to buy a new one, or I could stay home and do the sort of the safer bet and call and pay the change fee. Thinking rationally and quantifying things is the very first step to thinking strategically. Exactly. Yeah, it's very hard to build strategies if you don't have a numerical idea of the value of the outcomes of different strategies.
By evaluating both the chances of something happening and the outcome when it does, you have a better view of your best options. But at this level, everyone is just as calculating. To beat the optimal strategy, you have to find an edge.
There's something that's called game theory optimal, where if you're playing this style, then it means that you're unexploitable. Basically, the best case that an opponent can do to counter it is to also play game theory optimal. Therefore, you'll just sort of reach the same very high standard of play, and you're trying to not deviate from it at all. And that's where sort of the more like creativity and the artistic side of the game comes in, where you can do these deviations from the optimal play to exploit your opponent's weaknesses.
But they could be doing that to you as well.
Exactly. So you need to find a way to be as unpredictable as possible.
Von Neumann's maths proves that poker players must bluff unpredictably to avoid exploitation by a savvy opponent. It's an essential strategy, and it can be applied elsewhere.
If you're in a business negotiation, what's the minimum amount you'll take? There's a great opportunity to bluff and give a high number, because you're giving yourself the option for them to pay you that high number.
It might seem obvious, but bluffing like this is exactly what gives you the edge over others, particularly if their loss is your gain.
Anything that's a competition, then to make yourself unexploitable will just put you at a huge advantage.
So quantify everything, folks, and don't make yourself too easy to read. In win-lose games, your carefully calculated strategies can only get you what you want if your opponents are in the dark. But what if you're involved in a conflict where everyone could lose? During the second half of the 20th century, the biggest problem that game theorists had to contend with was the Cold War. The US and the Soviet Union were facing off against each other. And just as in poker, every strategy, every move and countermove had to be analysed. Except this time, the stakes could not have been higher. As an ally to the US, Britain had to prepare for the worst. In 1961, a top-secret facility was set up here in rural Worcestershire, regional seat of Government 9. It's one of a network of bunkers from which the British government would have operated in the event of a nuclear war. The moment that the Second World War ended with such a devastating show of nuclear force, the talk in the West began to focus on trying to prevent a military face-off that would mean that nuclear bunkers like this one would become a necessity. Now, the strategy that was on the table at the time was referred to somewhat euphemistically as preventative war. The idea being that the Americans would launch an unprovoked attack on the Soviet Union before they had the chance to acquire the bomb. Now, yes, that would mean a quick, hot war, but it would at least avoid a slow, expensive, and far more dangerous cold one. Preventative war is an argument still used today over North Korea, and at the time, its supporters included Winston Churchill and von Neumann himself. In 1950, von Neumann remarked, "With the Russians, it's not a question of whether, but of when. If you say, why not bomb them tomorrow, I say, why not today? And if you say today at 5 o'clock, I say, why not 1 o'clock? You can see where this kind of reasoning ends, and it is perfectly rational. If someone has to win, better that it be us." Despite the impeccable logic, America didn't attack Russia. And then it was too late, because Russia got the bomb too. By 1953, there was no outcome in which only one side could win. This demanded a new strategy, something which became known as mutually assured destruction, or MAD for short. Basically, the threat of you using massively destructive weapons on your enemy prevents your enemy from using those same weapons on you. Once everybody is armed, nobody has an incentive to either initiate a conflict or to disarm. And so nuclear war was avoided, but places like this and a hugely expensive, vast global nuclear arsenal was the result. Compared to von Neumann's games, in which one person's loss is the other's gain, mutually assured destruction, strangely, is something we come across far more in real life. Because most conflicts, whether at work, with friends or family, have the potential to end up in a stalemate. So often, we choose strategies that mean no one wins. To explain why, I'd like to begin with a rather unusual detective story. I'm looking at the Instagram page of the rapper Ludacris. In 2015, he shared this picture with his millions of followers. It had originally been posted on the Facebook page of the police department in Franklin County, Kentucky. And it reads, "Attention drug dealers. We offer a free service to help you eliminate your drug competition." And then under a quite large marijuana leaf, there are a series of sections where dealers can identify their competitors. You can fill out who your competition is, where they live, their phone numbers, even their hours of operation. It might seem like a gimmick, but the fact is, Franklin County PD were onto something. I think I need to find out a bit more about this, so I'm going to call the sheriff. Hello, Sheriff.
Hi, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Why would a dealer call in and tip off one of their competitors?
Obviously, if they eliminate it, the more they get, the more business they do, the more money the potential earning that they have that they'll make. And if you get rid of your competition, you're the only game in town, especially by having law enforcement do it.
This has really worked for you then as a tactic, getting the criminals to do the dirty on each other.
Yes, it's something that was very simple to do. And at the end of the day, if we've got drug dealers turning in drug dealers, that's a win.
Police 1, drug dealers 0. Well, this was obviously a pretty good score for Sheriff Melton, because what he did was force the local drug dealers into the most famous conundrum in the history of winning. It's called, appropriately enough, the prisoner's dilemma, and it demonstrates very clearly the dangers of falling into a lose-lose situation when acting in your own best interests. Think of it like this. Imagine Sheriff Melton has chucked a couple of shady-looking characters from his local beat into jail. He's got evidence to charge them with possession, but can only get them for dealing if they rat each other out. So he puts them in 2 separate cells and gives them both his clever flyer. Our suspects must now consider whether they should both keep their traps shut and only go away for 1 year each for possession, both rat the other out for dealing, and each get a 3-year sentence, or hope that they alone grass the other up, getting off scot-free while their competition gets a whopping 5 years, otherwise known as the sucker's payoff. So, what to do? Well, this option is the best. But there's a risk it could quickly turn sour if one person decides to basically betray the other. Good old Sheriff Melton knows these 2 are toe rags, and they know it too. So, to avoid being screwed over, the only stable solution for them is this. They both must implicate the other. A win for Sheriff Melton, but lose-lose for them. This unhappy scenario is called the Nash equilibrium. It's a beautifully simple proof that was published in 1950 by the mathematician John Nash when he was still in his early 20s. It won him a Nobel Prize, and it transformed the analysis of winning. What Nash proved was that in a situation with several possible outcomes, like this one, where people either can't or won't cooperate with each other, there is always a strategy which you and everyone else is best off opting for. Now, in the case of the prisoner's dilemma, paradoxically, that strategy ends up with lose-lose. Everybody wants to win by ratting out their competition, and everyone wants to avoid the sucker's payoff. And as a result, everyone ends up going to jail. Being uncooperative can cost you more than you bargained for. The reason Nash's proof matters so much is because these kind of dilemmas constantly appear in real life because of the way our individual interests often clash with those of others and of society. Whether you are a drug dealer or just out for dinner with your mates, no one wants to be the sucker, right?
So I remember the day I was arrested, then I was locked up for 48 hours. I remember thinking, oh, this is what happens.
If ever there was an example of Nash's theory in action, it's in the controversial world of professional cycling.
The global hero at the time was Lance Armstrong. We were really good friends. I remember him saying, I got caught with my hand in the cookie jar. I knew what Lance was doing. I was like, hang on a second.
David is one of the highest profile riders to talk candidly about the use of performance-enhancing drugs within cycling. Tell me about the first time that you realised that cycling perhaps wasn't squeaky clean.
My very first pro race in February 1997. My roommate was offered a cortisone pill We all carried around their little medical bags. And it was omnipresent. It was white noise, is what I've always described it as.
For 4 years, David trained and raced clean, but the pressure to remain competitive took its toll. Eventually, despite your initial resistance, you did decide to give in.
Yeah, I think that that is the term. I gave in. I didn't decide to join them. I gave in and thought, well, you know, I can't fight this anymore. I was an ethical person, but over time I just went...
Wears you down?
Well, just the environment you're in wears you down. You can put a good apple in a barrel of bad apples. It's always going to turn bad.
It's a classic prisoner's dilemma. In professional cycling, riders compete to win. If doping makes winning more likely, then abiding by the rules risks the sucker's payoff. And so the rational thing to do is cheat, because a faster field and a doping arms race has become the new norm. This dilemma unites all competitive sport. Though it's a lose-lose scenario if everyone cheats, nonetheless for individuals, cheating can give you the edge, if you can get away with it.
The fundamental reason I was there was because I wanted to win. I was very ambitious. If the goals you want to achieve are being achieved by the people who are cheating, why don't I do it?
David was the reigning world time trial champion when he was caught in 2004, receiving a 2-year ban. But after his punishment, he returned to racing clean.
David Miller comes up, hits the line, best time 31.15. Miller is back.
Every time I won from then on in, it was to prove a point, that it's possible to win clean.
And you're appealing because you were clean?
Because we were clean. It actually became a valuable asset to be clean and win races. It goes back to that whole the barrel of apples, make sure it's a barrel of good apples with one bad apple. That's easy to control. These guys will never have to encounter it because we have an anti-doping culture in professional cycling now.
David's experience illustrates the profound tension between individual drive to succeed and the greater good. Our winning instincts can be both our greatest asset and deeply destructive. This is something that's relevant to all of us. If you think about it, how many times have you been in a situation where you didn't want to upset the balance of things for fear that you might end up missing out? Maybe you have had a job where you ended up staying later and later at work just because everybody else was doing it and you didn't want to look like you were lazy. Or maybe you have failed to call someone out for a racist or a sexist comment just because you didn't want to look bad, you didn't want to make the fuss. Or maybe you have waited and waited to tell someone that you love them just because if you said it first and it wasn't reciprocated, you'd end up feeling heartbroken. Now, all of these situations are real-life examples of Nash equilibria. So what can be done about these traps, which are admittedly very logical? How can we break out of them and secure that elusive win-win? Well, I'd like to show you one option with the help of my favourite ever game show. So I've invited some people along to a screening of its dramatic climax.
You each have a golden ball with the word split written inside. You each have a golden ball with the word steal. If you both choose the split ball, you split today's jackpot of £100,150. If one of you splits and one of you steals, whoever chooses the steal ball will go home with today's jackpot. If you both choose the steal ball, you go home with nothing.
I am going to split this. I'm very, very happy to go home with 50,000.
You're generally going to split.
If I stole off you, every single person there would run over here and lynch me.
There was no way I could... I mean, everyone who knew me would just be disgusted if I stole.
Sarah, I can look you straight in the eye and tell you I am going to split. I swear down to you. I am going to split.
Sarah, Steve, choose either the split or the steel ball now. Hold it up.
We're going on with 50 grand each. I promise you that.
Split or steel? You never know what's coming in this game.
Trust me, that never gets any less painful to watch. Well, I think we can all agree that was pretty incredible.
I'm just really shocked that she would do such a thing.
What would you have done in that situation, though?
To be honest, I would have actually stolen as well.
Hang on, slight contradiction.
She seemed to be reading him really well to say, are you sure you're going to split? Are you sure? Do you promise me you're going to split? As soon as she knew that, she could have equally thought, I'm going to split as well, and we're both going to leave with some money.
Well, if you thought that was interesting, I want to show you another clip, which might be one of my favourite things of all time. That's the only introduction I'm going to give you.
Nick, Ibrahim.
Ibrahim, I want you to trust me. 100% I'm going to pick the steel ball.
Sorry, you're going to...
I'm going to choose the steel ball.
You're going to take
I want you to do split, and I promise you that I will split the money with you.
Well, after you've took the steel?
Yeah.
You're going to take steel?
Yeah.
I'm going to take split?
Yeah.
So you take the money?
And I will split it with you.
After the show?
Yeah.
Why don't we just both pick split?
I'm not going to pick split. I'm going to steal. Ibrahim, honestly, 100% I'm going to steal. If you do split, then I will split the money.
I can't see myself doing that.
OK, well, I'm going to steal, so we're going to leave with nothing.
We're walking away with no money because you're an idiot.
No, that's
You're
not
an idiot. You're an idiot. That's what you are. You're an idiot. You're an idiot.
Nick, choose split or steel. Ibrahim, choose split or steel. Now, please. Split or steel? Yes! Congratulations, you have both split and each received £6,800.
Why did you put me through that? Why did you do it for me?
Let's take a moment to recap what just happened. By promising he'll steal up front, Nick removes two possible outcomes to the game. This means Ibrahim can only steal and be guaranteed nothing, or split, handing the cash to Nick in the hope that he'll share it. Nick knows Ibrahim wants the cash, so despite his ultimatum, he also splits. It's a win-win thanks to a brilliant way of forcing cooperation. I am delighted that we are joined today by Nick from that video. Wow. Nick, that was pretty amazing. How did it come about, you appearing on Golden Balls?
So, when I initially saw it, I thought it was a bit horrendous of a game show because what happened basically is you're rewarded for shafting people. And I just wanted to prove that if you trust someone, actually, more often than not, people will come through for you. That was the motivation behind it.
Was there any point when you were worried that he wouldn't go with you, that he wouldn't go for split?
If he didn't split, then he'd lost everything. So you can either be stupid or really stupid. And when I say really stupid, you'd rather have nothing than see somebody get something.
You just had one clear strategy,
Yeah.
you just needed to stick to.
I tried to remove the dilemma.
Forced him into a position.
Yeah.
If you had won all of the money, would you have split it with him outside of the game?
Yes, I really would have done. It was about proving that if you trust people, sometimes they don't always shaft you, and that was the philosophy of why I wanted to do it.
Were you expecting it to get that much attention?
No, nobody could have foreseen that. Harvard University teach it in economics. UCL teach it in economics.
Yes,
Bath University do. I've been asked to go to New York to talk about it. President Obama's economist is including me in his book. It's just a bit insane, really.
Yeah, well, you did break the prisoner's dilemma. It's safe to conclude that having a strategic genius and all-round lovely man like Nick take control can be a real win for all. So, like him, look for strategies to force cooperation. Strong leadership, incentives, or shared morals and values underpin equilibria that work in everyone's favour. But they're hard won, and we don't need to look far to see the terrible consequences of our failure to cooperate.
In many situations in life, egotistical behavior is not only morally problematic, but it is also strategically unwise. I think a nice domestic example is washing dishes. No one loves it. Okay, it is a little bit annoying, you know, and we all know that it's better for someone else to do it. But if you are living in a shared house, the problem begins when all the players decide to adopt my strategy. And then no one washes dishes. The outcome is a tower of dirty plates, and it is not good. When you are taking into account only your personal good and all your thinking is self-centered and you don't care at all about other players, the result may be a total disaster.
It's so easy to disregard the small impact we might make just by ditching stuff for someone else to deal with. But many small acts of selfishness can have huge consequences. It's a phenomenon known as the tragedy of the commons.
For example, the damage to the atmosphere, the destruction of ocean ecosystems, rainforest logging, these issues are far more important, and it is really hard to tackle with them, even with rules and regulations.
Arguably, the challenge for government is to create rules that align the interests of individuals and society to find those win-wins. But like the rest of us, our leaders have their own political and economic goals to pursue, meaning there will always be the temptation for some to put their own short-term interests first. So in the real conflicts we all face, can we ever justify being uncooperative? Definitely, I'd argue, on occasion. Because some people really don't know what's good for them. I'd like to suggest we take a potentially very unstable situation. Taking two small argumentative children on holiday to demonstrate some strategies that can ensure you win in a domestic standoff. The first thing absolutely not to do is to make a non-credible threat.
Right, that's it. Holiday's cancelled. Turning the car around, we're going home.
The kids quickly work out that you won't do this, as it harms you just as much as them. Everybody wants a holiday. So, try a far more credible threat instead.
If you don't shut up, we're going to be spending the first day of the holiday visiting an art gallery. As long as they know you really like art galleries and you know they really hate them, this one is a much better strategy.
Even better, try a grand gesture called pre-commitment.
If one of you starts arguing again, you're going to go to bed at 6 o'clock all week, and the other one can stay up as late as they like. This one is quite a serious pre-commitment because you are risking not being able to pack them off to bed like normal, but you'll just have to hope that the prospect of them missing out is enough for them to be smart and stay quiet. In order to get what you want, any adversary has to believe you have the credibility and commitment to go through with your threats. But in the end, no matter how winning your tactics, there's one thing that's incredibly difficult to deal with. In any kind of interaction, our sense of what is and isn't fair is incredibly powerful. And in some circumstances, it can actually make us deliberately lose. To explore this apparently quite irrational way of getting what we want, Chaim and I are going to play something called the ultimatum game. And the rules are very simple.
Two players, one is called the proposer, and the other one is called the responder. The proposer gets a sum of money, for example, 100 pounds.
Is that what you've got in
Yes,
there?
yes. And the proposer have to decide how to split the money, and the responder must decide whether to accept or to reject. If the responder rejects the split, both players will end up with nothing, and it is one-shot game, take it or leave it offer.
Okay, well, the fairest thing to do, obviously, is to say 50-50.
50-50, of course.
I could get an extra £10 by saying 60-40.
Easily, I think.
However I decide, I mean, I do genuinely get some of the money.
Yes. Real money, a real game, everything is real.
Now to make some offers to a series of unsuspecting volunteers. I think I'm going to split it 70-30. I get the 70.
You get 70.
Yes.
Well, obviously it's really unfair, but I'm going to accept
But you have to decide. You are going
I'm going to accept it.
You accept. Okay, 30 pounds. Okay.
I'm going to check it.
No, don't check it. I'm a mathematician.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So unfair offer number one works in my favour.
What is your decision?
Okay, I'm going to go for £80 to me and £20 to you.
Yes or no? It is
No.
take it or leave it off.
Leave it.
No,
Yeah.
leave it.
But hang on, you came here with nothing.
I did, but I feel like if you were like £50 for you, £50 for me, I'd be fine with that. I would have said deal. We both came here with nothing, so we both should have left with something, and an equal amount would have been better than an unequal amount.
Wow.
Okay.
You see, it contradicts all the economical predictions, yes? Economics say 1 is better than none, 20 is for sure better than none. Very, very nice.
Economics says Saeed here should accept, but I'm denied. Next.
Hello.
I quite like money. So £90 to me and £10 to you.
You know what? Why not? I'll take £10.
You have 10 pounds. It is yours.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And Hannah?
Thank you.
Hannah, such a rich person.
Thank you very much. Are you happy with your decision?
It's pretty unfair, but
Pretty unfair, huh?
I am a realist and I like £10 at least in my pocket, so I'm at least £10 richer.
So 10 is better than none.
Yeah.
A man after my own logical heart. After 3 offers, I've bagged £160 of a possible 240. So why did I not clean up? The 20-80 split. Not taking £20 seems bonkers to me.
You know, the 20, it is approximately the world average of the split that people refuse to take. People seem to show an unwillingness to accept unfairness, and they are prepared to pay.
80-20.
Yes.
I mean, they're basically being irrational, right?
People usually behave rationally from their point of view. So it is really hard to define what is rational, you know, what is not. For example, Saeed, yes, he paid £20, but to teach you a lesson, £20, it seems to me a low price, you see, nothing almost, yes.
Yeah, wow. It was an expensive lesson for me as
For
well.
you, yes, but not for him.
It might seem like an irrational way to get what we want, but what we're looking at here is the long game. The act of sacrificing a small win to punish someone means they may well be less selfish with us and others in the future. It's a perfectly rational way to secure greater collective success. But most creatures on Earth aren't rational. So why do we see cooperative, even altruistic behaviour in the animal kingdom that seems to benefit others more than the individual? Surely this contradicts the theory of evolution, based, as it is, on the struggle for life and the survival of the fittest.
When I learned about evolution at school, I was under the impression that it was all about competition, that every animal was necessarily out for itself, and the fitter you are, the more likely you are to win fights for mates, for food and for territory. If you can ace those conflicts, the more likely you are to pass on your genes and win at the game of life.
It has been said that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. And evolution has been based on conflict. It is a struggle for existence. In animal behavior, there exist many examples where animals fight within a species, but where they fight according almost to rules, where they seem to restrain themselves and don't escalate the conflict too much.
You could try to explain individuals avoiding violence as being for the benefit of the group, but that's not quite how evolution works.
If there is a single individual ready to escalate the conflict, and all others are going to run away when they see that things become serious, then this individual will win everything, will have many offsprings. The offspring will win his trait of escalating a conflict, and this trait will become more and more frequent.
In this scenario, aggressive behaviour will always win out. So there has to be an alternative explanation. It only began to emerge in the early 1970s when British biologist John Maynard Smith was given a manuscript to review, written by an unknown American called George Price.
Now, Price wasn't a mathematician or a biologist or a game theorist, but he had read von Neumann and he'd written about Cold War games and the uses of deterrence. His paper, titled Antlers, Intraspecific Combat and Altruism, suggested that things like giant deer antlers weren't actually for maiming your rivals at all. Instead, they were clever strategic accessories that would help you limit conflict and avoid the destructive effects of fighting. It's just like nuclear missiles. Antlers are the kind of weapon that you could parade in front of your enemy, hopefully without ever having to actually use them.
Maynard Smith was struck by this, and together with Price, created a simple game to explore how such limited war strategies could evolve.
And he called it the Hawk-Dove game.
Picture an imaginary species of bird that only has two inherited behavioural strategies. One is aggressive or hawkish, and the other more cooperative or dovish. If two hawks clash over something like food, their strategy means total war. They'll fight, risking injury, and no guarantee of food either. Now, if a hawk and a dove meet, the dove initially stands up for itself, but then scarpers. Finally, if doves meet, they'll share. In each interaction, both birds receive a score. And if these are added up over time, It reveals which behaviours are most likely to benefit individuals and so survive down the generations. On the face of it, if everyone was displaying dove-like behaviour, it looks like it could work, as well as being generally nice for everyone. But unfortunately, that's unstable, because just one meanie hawk could come along and immediately have the upper hand on everybody. And if that hawkish behaviour really took off, that too would be unstable because of the constant risk and cost of violence. Now, what the math shows is that a stable population is possible, but only if you have 1/3 hawks and 2/3 doves. Now, those exact numbers might change slightly if you tweak the payoff, but the key point here is that this was a mathematical proof that there was a strategic advantage to avoiding conflict. Evolution, it turned out, is not simply a winner-takes-all kind of game. And so, scientists took to this new evolutionary form of game theory. The reason? To find the ultimate long-term winning strategy for us all. It was an ingenious American political scientist called Robert Axelrod, who around 1980 took the next big step.
Axelrod invited economists, mathematicians, political scientists, psychologists and sociologists, all of whom had written theoretical papers on cooperation and the prisoner's dilemma, to compete in a computer tournament.
The challenge was to design a computer program that would play the best combination of attacking and more cooperative behaviour. It was a bold move, considering the golden age of popular computer games and coding was still in its infancy.
Researchers from around the world mailed in their computer programs via post. It was all to see which of their electronic beasts, some of which were a lot more cooperative than others, would emerge the winner.
14 programs were to play 200 rounds of the prisoner's dilemma against themselves and one another. As you'd expect, cooperating with your opponent scores well. But you could get a much higher payoff by attacking a cooperator all of the time. But attack an attacker and your score will suffer. And so the tournament ran, with some players doing better than others.
One strategy, for example, was nicknamed the Grudger. It would cooperate until it was attacked, at which point it would get the hump and never cooperate again for the rest of the game.
After competing against everyone else, the Grudger crawled in 7th place.
The surprise winner with 504 points was written in just 4 lines of code and was easily the simplest program that had been submitted. It was called Tit for Tat. It would start off by cooperating and then would just copy whatever the opponent did in the previous round. So if the opponent either attacked or cooperated, Tit for Tat would respond in kind.
Tit for Tat's behaviour over the course of the competition is basically, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So was this the winning strategy everyone was looking for? Well, no. Because unlike in real life, these computer programs, including Tit for Tat, could play endlessly without ever making mistakes.
Imagine if I decided to use Tit for Tat as my new strategy for winning at life. So I would cooperate by default, lovely, and only retaliate if someone was really mean to me, just to teach them a lesson. But what if, idiotically, I sort of accidentally was a bit mean to someone? Say I just bumped into them. Oh, sorry.
If they're also playing Tit for Tat, they'll have to shove me back, formerly known as defecting. And then I'd have to do the same, as would he. We'll defect forever. Not great, is it? But some scientists weren't quite ready to give up on tit for tat just yet. Carl Sigman and his student Martin Novak started experimenting with a new kind of evolutionary tournament. But this time, as in the natural world, competing strategies could evolve and make mistakes. Using computer simulations, they watched strategies like tit for tat emerge and compete over thousands of generations.
After the first 50 or 100 rounds, it seemed as if everyone was a defector. Everyone? Not quite. There was one little minority playing something like tit for tat. And this little minority very slowly increased and became more and more frequent and was actually defeating the defectors.
The key was to let natural selection find the winning strategy.
If you wait still longer, then you will see that another, more generous form of tit for tat is going to evolve and to take over.
And here it comes, generous tit for tat. This strategy will always cooperate first. But when facing defection, around 1 out of every 3 times it'll just ignore it and cooperate regardless. Of all the possible strategies, and despite its forgiving ways, generous tit for tat consistently came out on top.
For me, it is still one of the fondest remembrances of my scientific life. There was no master program behind it, no design for forgiveness, so to speak. It came out all by itself.
A purely mathematical simulation had revealed that winning strategies in the long run tend to be generous, hopeful, and forgiving. Now, this basic moral code just emerged. Perhaps you could even take this as proof of the existence and advantage of goodness. So why then don't we live in a wonderful, generous and forgiving utopia? The simulations pointed to an answer. Over generations of stability, the main strategy becomes total cooperation. But this is fragile, because hawkish defectors can rapidly take over and do their worst. And yet slowly, thanks to strategies like tit for tat, cooperation emerges again and again. Despite its fragility, there is hope, because ultimately cooperation can't be suppressed. Thanks to things like altruism, kindness, and reciprocity, it re-emerges time after time. And these aren't just codes that are divined by priests and philosophers. They have pure mathematics and evolution itself behind them. So where does that leave you and me? Well, I want you to try something out, starting tonight. Now, this could work for any kind of relationship, but let's imagine that it's your partner. What I want you to do is to cooperate, but copy their previous move. So if they come home one day with a big bunch of flowers, you should get to work on your own romantic gesture. But if they come home one night much drunker and later than they promised, you get to do something equivalent. But every now and then you should forgive one of their slip-ups, because nobody's perfect and you're going to mess up too at some point. So there you have it. Strategies for a happier life and a better world, all thanks to maths. I call that a win.